Today on the news and why it matters, Mick Mulvaney stirring the pot again. Was there quid pro quo? Wasn't there quid pro quo? We got a lot coming up today, and I can't even talk. It starts right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. Happy Friday. I am Sara Gonzalez, today joined by Stu Bergier, who just filled in for 3 hours on radio earlier.
Yes,
with
a sore throat.
So
I've been sick all week, and my voice is barely holding up.
So you're really ready to be here.
Yes, I'm excited.
Okay, all right. Jason Howerton, social media guru.
I think you got
Blaze Media.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Are you?
I've been having, I think it's just allergies, but my throat's been bothering me all week.
That's what sick people at the office say all the time. I think it's just allergies.
Like, people do say that, but like, I'm the type of person that if I'm sick, I don't try to impress people by going to work. I stay home. I don't care.
And we've got First Liberty's Jeremy Dys back in the house.
Thanks for having me.
What is?
It is Casual Friday.
I mean,
I don't think we approved that.
No, you always have worn a suit.
It's a sign of a lack of respect for
I
you,
agree.
Sarah. I think it's a lack of respect for you.
Oh, so the patriarchy wants to walk in here and just not even wear a jacket.
There's nothing I can say. There's zero way to get out of this at all.
All right, so Mick Mulvaney, he went and held a press conference. Jeremy, you said this before the show. Who authorized him to go out there?
Yeah, I mean, look, they haven't had a briefing in the White House briefing room for how long? And all of a sudden, this is what comes out of them. Maybe there's a reason why they haven't been having a lot of briefings.
Yeah. So, Stu, I think, did you play the audio during radio?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us, just kind of summarize the comments. I have kind of a mashup of what the left is trying to do.
Yeah.
But tell us what the comments actually were first.
First of all, it's my understanding it was Trump specifically that sent Mulvaney out to talk about this, because
he also sends Giuliani out.
Yeah, right. Like it's not always the best idea. Now, I'm a Mulvaney fan, generally speaking. I actually like Mulvaney. He's, he was a pretty good congressman, and I think he's a generally smart guy. I think he's done a good job with the OMB. He gets himself in a position as a chief of staff to basically have to defend every position, and some of these are positions he's outwardly disagreed with in Congress. So it's a little bit awkward. But the two things that were that stuck out is, first of all, he said, if people are complaining that politics is involved in this foreign policy, get over it.
Politics and what? Politics and government? Politics?
I know, exactly. And that's kind of how I took it too. It's like, politics are part of this. These people are elected. They are elected, generally speaking, because they have a political opinion and platform, and then they apply that to foreign policy. I mean, Donald Trump's politics of foreign policy are he wants to withdraw from certain regions. He wants to pressure people with tariffs. He wants to, these are generally speaking consistent with what he's said, and he's applied those all over the place. I don't like all of them. Some of them I like. Some of them I don't. Mulvaney saying that he's being super frank, and he's made a massive mistake in, you're not supposed to be honest in Washington. But of course, this is always applied the same way it was applied under the Barack Obama administration. He used his power and his politics to support the issues that he liked. I mean, look at the way they utilized the courts. They constantly were going after, when it comes to Obamacare, the way they pressured, Catholic institutions to try to supply birth control. What do you think?
Celibate nuns?
Celibate nuns, yeah. Right. And it's like, what do you think that is? That's him injecting politics into the courts. It's him injecting it into different sorts of policy. He does the same thing, of course, with foreign affairs. What they're taking it as is he's saying, like, well, I'm trying to help my election by doing this, and that's another big line. The other one they said was a big line was he basically admitted that there was a quid pro quo, where he says, look, was part of the reason we didn't give Ukraine this money that we wanted a Biden investigation? Well, yeah. And he's like, we do that all the time. Because he was asked specifically by John Carl, isn't that a quid pro quo? And he says, it happens all the time. Now, we know it happens all the time because Joe Biden is on camera saying that he did it. And it's actually the basis of this entire Ukraine thing, where he says, I'm withholding $1 billion in funding unless you fire this one particular prosecutor. The difference here is, specifically, the media treats Donald Trump's thing with Biden as only personally beneficial to him and not in the public interest. And they treat Biden's prosecutor situation, which was also tied to his son getting a bunch of money, They treat that as only a patriotic gesture. And if you look at it through that prism, absolutely Donald Trump should be impeached. If the only reason he's doing this and the only reason he cares about it is to try to screw over his opponent, well, of course he should be impeached. However, the Vice President of the United States being involved in corrupt activities in Ukraine is not something that is at odds with the public interest. Is it nice for politicians when these things happen to align, when personal and public happen to align, as is the case with Biden's policy in Ukraine, as is the case with Trump's policy with Biden? Sure, it's wonderful. What a Washington paradise that is. And it happens to happen all the time. Read Secret Empires by Peter Schweizer, where he not only outlines all of these things being in complete alignment with Joe Biden, which has been the one that's got the publicity, but also Mitch McConnell with his wife Elaine Chao. Not only there, but also all throughout the government, Barack Obama with his with multiple levels of his dealing as well. It's very common. I think because Mulvaney was very blunt about it, he probably should have reworded it, and it's why he backed off afterwards. But to me, this is very much priced into government and the Trump administration in general.
Yeah, and so I want to bring you two gentlemen in, but I want to first, we knew it was coming, right? So let's play the way that the left is already portraying this as just, this is it, Trump is toast, he's done. Watch.
There was no quid pro quo. There was nothing.
Did he also mention to me in the past the corruption related to the DNC server? Absolutely. No question about that.
There was no quid pro quo at all.
To be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo.
We do that all the time with foreign policy.
There was no quid pro quo, unlike Biden.
That's it, and that's why we held up the money.
Jason, your thoughts?
Well, firstly, I love the edits. They're fantastic. But look, here's the bottom line, and I actually posted about this, that it's so disingenuous to clutch your pearls when government does government things. And it's both sides of this. It's why people like me are so exhausted with the entire exercise. I don't know if I can say it better or more eloquently than Stu said it, but this happens.
I think it's a low floor here.
We're all
Most
rooting for you,
humans
though.
can. Yes, most humans can.
And you see where I am in the equation. But this happens all the time. And to pretend like it doesn't, it's exhausting. You had the CNN banner. I remember when Brian Stelter, I think it was, tweeted, CNN banner, Trump admits quid pro quo, like this, all caps, like it's like this big deal. I'm like, did y'all do that for Biden? Like when the Biden video came out, or when it came out? Like I still haven't seen that footage on those networks, right? And it's just exhausting, and it's why you don't. It's why there's no alignment, because I'm not even listening anymore. I've tuned it out, and I know a lot of other people have, and so now I think that's dangerous, because now again both sides are just like shut up. And then sanity is all alone in the middle.
Yeah. Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it is just a part of government, would you say it's priced into the government on that? I think that's probably true, but I think I don't hear either of you saying, but I'm okay with that, right?
No.
It should be done with that. Whether it is the left or the right, it's everywhere. And you're right, it is priced into government. It's a kind of entwined in. It is the swamp that we were supposed to be getting away from and all these things, and yet we're still having to kind of pull off that. Now, it's been difficult, I think, for the president to actually pull out of the swamp and actually to clear out the swamp, because the swamp creates its own swamp monster no matter what happens, no matter what you go into. You're going to get dirty if you go into the swamp, no matter what happens on those things. And he may have brought some dirt in on his own. I don't know. But the reality is, it is part of government. It should not be part of government. I don't know if you guys covered this last week or this week with Bill Barr's comments to Notre Dame last week. If you haven't watched his speech to Notre Dame, you really need to go watch or read it or whatever. It's going to be one of the best speeches, at least in the modern era. It should be in the top 100 of American government, probably. Very well put, because he's saying, look, if a self-governed people don't have their own moral compass, if there's not a common moral ideal to which we are all pulling, we will then either turn to one of two things as a people. We would either then throw off the shackles of self-government and seek tyranny to govern us, to impose those restraints against us. Or, he says, we will go into the form of licentiousness, which is a completely self-determined, self-individualized, all the appetites are available to us, and we're going to seek them all over the place by themselves. I think we are teetering on both ends of that stick right now, saying that we're seeking this licentiousness, the ability to be able to get whatever quid pro quo and then pass it off as just this is the way the world works. If it's Biden, Biden's son, or whatever, saying, well, yeah, of course I did that, but I didn't really gain anything from it all. Well, come on, everybody knows that you did. Right. Everybody knows that you got it because of your last name, and everybody knows that Donald Trump Jr. gets access because of his full name in the whole thing. We need to stop that business, that licentious behavior in there, and realize that we're trying to send people that are not necessarily saints into government, but have a restraint that is imposed upon them because they understand there is a higher moral good. This is something we used to in this country call God, and we ought to maybe get back to that reality that there is something that is higher than government itself to which we owe a duty and a responsibility. If we don't have that responsibility imposed upon us by ourselves, it will be imposed upon us by without.
I love your optimism and your idealism that I lost somewhere along the road. Yeah. Well, I wish I could get back to that, but
maybe you're like me, Jason, because you said I don't hear either of you saying you're okay with it. I'm not okay with that.
I expect it.
Right, and also I'm thinking, okay, but I don't like giving foreign aid to a country that's corrupt. I mean, I don't like giving foreign aid to any country, right? But I don't like giving foreign aid to a country if there's a bunch of corruption going on and dirty stuff. I don't want to give them the money, so I kind of do want to withhold. You know what I mean?
But that's what's happened here, right? Is that Congress has kicked the can to the administration, and then they got upset when the administration took the matters into their own hands, right? This is kind of what is going on with Trump. They said, "Here's a bunch of money, send it to Ukraine." Trump took the money and said, well, I'll give it to you if you will do whatever. Or something like that. Well, that's because Congress didn't correctly identify and impose their responsibility of governing correctly on that. And that's continual, whether it's this issue. We talked about this, I think, last week on the court case before the Supreme Court on redefining the word sex in Title VII. They kick the can, they don't do what their branch of government is supposed to do. And so that three-legged stool of government is off balance, and people keep on. Of course, our country is unstable because of that.
Well, I think the other problem, real quick, is what Stu said before, which is the media
I agree. It was a problem what Stu said before.
They get to interpret Trump's intentions, right?
Yes.
Is it within the realm of possibility that when Trump did this, he really was thinking, you guys are corrupt, and forget this money until you figure out
everything he
is
said.
Is it possible that he had good intentions, right? Of course it is. Is it possible that he had shady intentions? Of course it is. But you don't get to just decide that I know who Trump is because I'm on CNN.
Right, there's a judgment built in.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, I totally agree with that. And they do the same thing with Biden. They only interpret it in a positive way. And I'm not, as you point out, I'm not arguing the virtue of either.
Right.
My belief is that both of them had their own personal interests in mind, and that is a problem. You point out one way of a real solution and the way it should be solved, which is become a more virtuous people. And I connect with you as well on this, and I am this is why I argue for a small government that doesn't have power to have the influence to demand these things. I think it's one of the things that the founders did really well. They were a virtuous people, right? But they also understood the fallibility of the human being, right? They understood that people would fail. They understood that these things would happen, and it's one of the reasons they gave us control of our lives and not some king who would come up with the perfect idea. But also they created a small, a limited government that would not have enough power to be able to have as much influence on our lives as this one does.
How about we stop making millionaires out of lawmakers?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like when that's the end result, you become a millionaire and you book deals. Like, of course, corrupt people are going to be drawn to that. Like, let's stop making them millionaires.
Yeah, and that's the way it was at the beginning, right?
It's a service, right?
Yeah,
it's a public service.
Yeah.
It's not a job.
All right, back in a minute.
Cold in here without my suitcase.
It's always cold in here. It's always cold in
That's
here.
why he wears the jacket. He didn't try to look nice. Good news, everyone. Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, has just won a seat on the UN Human Rights Council.
Oh, good.
Yes. So he will be very, very, I feel like, fair.
Is that for his work in the Venezuelan weight loss program that he implemented?
It must be. It must be.
Yeah, they're looking really trim over there.
I mean, are we living in an upside-down world? I realize that the UN is garbage, but in what world can a man who starves his own people, and what are they doing with minimum wage right now?
They are raising the minimum wage because by 275%, because their inflation, the number is like their inflation estimate. The government won't release one, The opposition party is saying it's 100% per year. Actual economists are saying it's 33,000% a year. So that's a bit of a problem. But they are raising the.
Is Milton Bradley printing their money now?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah, okay.
If they're lucky. Yeah, he's in the middle of that. I mean, this is the same organization that did the same thing with Robert Mugabe, though, right? They gave him he was on the Human Rights Commission at one point. The UN is garbage, and so it's not really a surprise that they would do this.
I just.
They're not even trying anymore.
Well, right, but what is going on in Venezuela right now is incredible. At the same time that we've got Elizabeth Warren, she won't say she's a socialist, but she is a socialist. Bernie Sanders, obviously a socialist, admits
Probably
it.
so, yeah.
All of these front runners are pushing these same policies, and we're watching Venezuela burn.
Because it's not the real socialism. I don't know how many times I can explain this to you guys. It's not the real one. The real one will come when we do it, and then when that doesn't work, there'll be one more real one, and then by that point, that's the utopia. We have like a few more steps till we get to the utopia, but we're almost there.
Might I make a detailed case as to why this actually isn't the real socialism?
Please.
Because they talk about Europe, and he just wants European socialism, and that's all he wants. So here's this is the actual truth, and these are all numbers coming from either Bernie Sanders' campaign or the Congressional Budget Office, and then there's one that has not have an estimate that Brian Riedel put together, who's from the Manhattan Institute, his best estimate. So let me give you all of these. These are the proposals, just the proposals, new ones from Bernie Sanders in this campaign. Higher public school teacher salaries, $400 billion over the next decade. K-12 education spending generally, $800 billion more. Paid family leave, $1.6 trillion. Infrastructure, $1 trillion. Housing. Now, this is another housing guarantee, $2.5 trillion over the next decade. Expanding Social Security, which is already insolvent, but let's expand it more, $1.8 trillion. Free public college and tuition, plus forgiving all student loans, that is $3 trillion. Then we have this one is the amazing one, $15 an hour, guaranteed jobs for everyone, okay? So that's important, full benefits and everything else. The estimated cost for that is $30.1 trillion. Now, there is an asterisk on this one in that it estimates all sorts of things that are impossible. Like, for example, someone would work at a regular job for $11 an hour and not just take the government job that is offered to them for $15 an hour guaranteed.
Those are the same people that are returning their guns to Beto.
Yes, exactly. Those people are.
Yeah.
It also doesn't take into, it's not just unemployed people that would take these jobs, of course. And so, not to mention, would anybody show up? Why would you show up? You can't get fired. It's a guaranteed job. But that's $30.1 trillion. They think it would be another $30 trillion in reality. But the 30.1 is the low estimate for that one. His climate plan, as you know, it's a major threat, $16.3 trillion over the next decade. Again, these are his numbers. And then Medicare for all, $40 trillion. Grand total, $97.5 trillion over the next decade, plus the extra $30 trillion with a jobs program that is almost guaranteed. Now, to give you, I was making the point on socialism. Right now, our entire budget over the next decade would be $60 trillion. So we're adding another $120 trillion on top of that. With all government spending combined, this would bring us to $214 trillion, or about 75% of our entire GDP would go to government spending. The average of Europe is 43%. So we'd be at 75, they're at 43% of GDP. It is not the socialism he's talking about. This is hardcore. This is Venezuelan socialism. These levels would necessarily employ about half of the population by the federal government. That's not capitalism. It's not even close to it.
How is he allowed to be on a stage or an interview or anywhere without being completely laughed out of the room? I don't get it. Like, they treat him, the closest you get is like, well, how are you going to pay for it? Yeah. And then he gives some nonsense answer, all the billionaires and millionaires.
Millionaires.
And then that's it. And then that's the end of the
Why are
press.
you picking on a guy that just had a heart attack? I mean, you are cold-hearted.
And he doesn't say millionaires anymore because he is one.
Because he is one.
Because he is one.
What did the other guy say, though, about billionaires? That the billionaires should
not exist?
Should not exist, and he was a billionaire.
And he was a billionaire. I agree.
If that doesn't get picked up by anybody, I mean, why would they pick up on Bernie Sanders, sweet old lovable Bernie Sanders?
It's true. And I will say, in this plan, he does propose to pay for a lot of it in taxes. The problem is he's leaving out a little bit they think a 10-year budget gap would be 113 trillion. His taxes would pay for 23 trillion. So we just need to figure out the extra 90 trillion or so. No big deal.
That's incredible.
Fascinating.
Well,
And
that's all
this
just the-
guy's in third place, by the way. He's not like out of the race. He's not the. You remember he's not Dennis Kucinich at 0%. This guy's leading. He's up there in these states, and if it wasn't for his heart attack, who knows what he'd be doing?
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And look, that's just the economic numbers, and that is bad enough. And I could say, just as a kind of a funny quip, that at least we'd have a planet. I mean, right?
Right.
The Green Deal, at least we exist.
It would solve everything.
Right.
Sure.
But what about all the other costs that go into this as well? Because what happens when the government expands this broadly is all those other individual rights that we love and cherish so much in this world, they have to concede to the burgeoning government that is occupying every corner of our lives. So do we think for one moment that Aaron and Melissa Klein are going to be able to be cake bakers again? Do you think that Beto's, telling everybody what they really believe was just a one-off thing and not really going to? Of course, they're going to come after the tax exemptions of churches and synagogues and mosques and everybody else that doesn't adhere to their socialized idea of what the good and the right and the beautiful actually is. So this is what you're making the case for, and I think very persuasively is this is economic horribleness. We can't even you can't even conceive what the actual words are to say how bad it actually would be.
Economic terrorism.
I can't. I just don't think they're allowed on television.
Yeah, but on top of all that, what you're making the case for is that this is an absolute undercut of anything that we used to know as freedom whatsoever. And when that level of freedom goes away economically, you can be sure that all the rest of the freedoms go away. And okay, I'm the religious liberty guy at the table. I get it. I'm going to make my point because that's what I do. But there's a reason why the First Amendment is the first of the amendments, right? Is to say, no, you can't have this one. Well, if the government can occupy every other aspect of life, it is itself God and it has to be worse. It cannot have any competitor to that environment.
Yeah. Great point, Liberty guy. Back in a minute.
And combine it with the first conversation. If the corruption is like this now, imagine what it is here. 75%.
Hey, we have winners. We have winners for the contest that we ran.
Me? Did I win?
You did. It was you.
Yes.
Yeah. And we will be contacting you guys later today. So check your inboxes, and don't hate me if you didn't win. I'm sorry. I didn't pick. Also, don't forget about the M1 ball that's coming up. It is October 26th. Go to mercury1.org. Get your tickets there. I think it's /M1 ball. I'm going to be there. I'm emceeing. Of course, Glenn and Tanya are going to be there. We're going to have food, drinks, music. It's going to be a blast. Go get your tickets. Overtime starts now. Now. Next. Now.